She live-streamed her own husband's humiliation to 40,000 people, held up his worn dress shirt like evidence of everything he'd failed to become, and told the world that 9 years of marriage to him was 9 years of settling. And she was wrong about every single word of it. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known because she had spent 9 years deciding he wasn't worth paying attention to, was that the quiet man she was publicly discarding had his name on $40 billion, not coming, not promised, already there, already his. The paperwork had cleared 2 days before she hit that live button, and she smiled into that camera without knowing she was about to hand a billionaire the only reason he needed to finally open a box he'd been keeping closed for 18 months. She thought she was leveling up, and she was signing her own verdict. But here is the question that will keep you watching until the very last second of this story, when a man this patient, this quiet, this disciplined, finally decides to use his power, was how far does he let it go, and how much did she lose before she finally understood what she had thrown away? If this is your kind of story, the kind where everything the arrogant didn't see coming arrives all at once, hit that like button right now and subscribe so you never miss what we drop next. And drop your city in the comments. We want to know where in the world you're watching from today, because this community is everywhere and we love to see it. Now let me take you back to the Sunday afternoon when a man said nothing, watched everything. Dylan left a house that was already, in every way that mattered, no longer hers. Raymond Beaumont was the kind of man who ironed his own shirts. Not because anyone asked him to, not because he was trying to impress somebody, but because his father had taught him that a man who takes care of his things takes care of himself. And Raymond had carried that lesson quietly for 41 years, like a stone worn smooth in his pocket. The shirt he was wearing that Sunday was a pale blue button-down he had bought from the clearance rack at Walmart 3 years ago, $6. He had worn it to Tanya's graduation from the Emory MBA program, stood in the back of that auditorium and clapped until his palms were red, and driven her and her sorority sisters to dinner afterward without being invited to sit at the main table. He had not complained. And he had eaten at the bar and tipped 20%, and driven everybody home. That was Raymond. The living room of their house on Briarwood Court smelled like Tanya's perfume and something else. A kind of ceremony, a staging. The furniture had been rearranged slightly. Just enough. A chair angled toward the natural light from the front window. Tanya's phone propped on the bookshelf, its small red recording light already glowing. Kevin stood near the hallway with his own phone raised, grinning the way he always grinned when he was about to enjoy something that wasn't his to enjoy. Shirley sat in the armchair near the window in her good church clothes, her hands folded in her lap, her expression arranged into something that was trying to be neutral and landing closer to satisfied. Mont Raymond stood in the center of the room and understood immediately what this was. Tanya was dressed like she had somewhere to be. Her hair was done. She had on the gold earrings she saved for occasions. She looked at Raymond the way a person looks at something they have already decided to put down, and she began to speak to the camera more than to him. She talked about growth, about alignment, about knowing your worth and making hard decisions. She used the word journey 3 times in 90 seconds. The comment section was already moving. Raymond could see the numbers climbing in the corner of Kevin's screen from across the room. 40,000 people, 50, the little hearts and fire emojis scrolling upward like sparks off a bonfire. Then Tanya reached behind her and picked up the pale blue shirt. Or she had gone into the closet and found it and brought it out like evidence. She held it up by the collar, let it hang there between 2 fingers, and she looked directly into Kevin's camera with an expression that Raymond would remember for the rest of his life. Not cruel exactly, but utterly certain. The certainty of a woman who had already decided what the story was and was simply narrating it now for an audience. "This," she said, "is what 9 years of settling looks like." The comment section erupted. Raymond did not move. He did not speak. His face did not change in any way that Kevin's camera could capture, or that Shirley could report back to her church friends on Monday morning. He was very still in the way that deep water is still. Not empty, not calm, just too far down to be disturbed by what was happening on the surface. His eyes moved once. They went to the top shelf of the open closet behind Tanya, where she had pulled the shirt from. There, half hidden behind a stack of shoeboxes, sat a small metal file box with a combination lock. It was dark grey and dented on one corner from a move years ago. Tanya had complained about it more than once, called it dusty, called it clutter, asked him more than once what on earth was in that rusty little thing. He had never told her. For 1/2 of 1 second, the camera Kevin was holding happened to catch the closet. The box was visible in the background, obscure and unremarkable, the kind of detail a person looks past without registering. 40,000 people looked past it. Raymond looked right at it. Then he picked up his keys from the side table. He did not slam them. He did not say a single word, and he walked to the front door, opened it with the same even pressure he used every morning on his way to work, and he pulled it closed behind him without looking back at Tanya, or Kevin, or Shirley in her good church clothes. He sat in his car in the driveway for a long time. When his phone buzzed, it was a notification from an account he did not follow. Someone had already clipped the video and reposted it. The caption read, "She really said what she said." It had 4,000 shares. Raymond watched the number change, then he set the phone face down on the passenger seat, backed out of the driveway, and drove away from Briarwood Court in the gathering dark. He had a 9 o'clock meeting in the morning. He had been rescheduling it for 18 months. It was time. To understand the Sunday on Briarwood Court, I think you have to understand the 9 years that built it. Raymond Beaumont had not always been the man standing silent in his own living room while strangers laughed at him through a phone screen. He had once been the man Tanya Price chose, deliberately, enthusiastically. She had told her mother he was steady. She had told her friends he was dependable. She had used those words like they were compliments, back when she still meant them that way. The first 3 years were honest. Raymond worked the warehouse floor at Consolidated Freight on Fulton Industrial, clocking in before sunrise and coming home smelling like diesel and effort. Tanya was teaching middle school English then, grading papers at the kitchen table while Raymond cooked. They ate late most nights. They had a system. It was a good life, quiet and real, or the kind that doesn't photograph well, but holds together in all the ways that matter. Then Tanya got accepted to the Emory MBA program, and everything shifted on its axis. Raymond did not hesitate for a single day. He told her to go. He told her he would cover everything: the mortgage on Briarwood Court, the utilities, the groceries, the car note on her Accord. He picked up extra shifts on weekends without telling her. He ate sandwiches for lunch 6 days a week for 2 years and never mentioned it once. When Tanya's program required networking dinners on Thursday evenings, Raymond ironed her blazers and had dinner ready when she got home at 10. When she needed to study, he kept the house quiet. When she needed to practice presentations, he sat on the couch and listened and told her she was ready. He meant it every time. Or what Raymond did not fully see, because he was not looking for it, was what the MBA program was doing to Tanya beyond the education. She was being absorbed into a world that sorted people by their earning potential and their zip codes, and she was learning to sort herself the same way. She started talking about her cohort constantly, who had which internship, whose husband worked where, whose apartment was in which building. She started paying attention to things she had never paid attention to before. Labels, titles, the particular way certain women looked at other women's shoes. Raymond's shoes did not pass inspection. Shirley Price had never fully warmed to Raymond, but after the MBA program began, her coolness hardened into something more architectural. She came to Sunday dinners at Briarwood Court and moved through the kitchen like she was inspecting a rental property she had decided not to lease. She rearranged things without asking. She made observations disguised as questions. She would look at Raymond's sensible furniture and say things like, "Tanya, when you finish that degree, you all are going to want something with more space." The word "you all" was doing a great deal of work in those sentences. Raymond heard it. He kept serving the pot roast. Kevin arrived in the second year of the MBA program, nominally to save money, actually to have an audience. He took the guest room and immediately treated the house like a venue. He had opinions about everything. Raymond's car, Raymond's job title, Raymond's clothes, Raymond's general presentation in the world. And he never said anything directly. Kevin's cruelty was the cowardly kind, delivered sideways, packaged as jokes. He would tell the story of Raymond fixing his transmission, which Raymond had done for free, on a Saturday, without complaint, and make it funny in a way that made Raymond sound like the help. Tanya would laugh, Shirley would smile, Raymond would be in the kitchen cleaning up, out of the frame. Tanya graduated from Emory on a Saturday in May. Raymond stood in the back of the auditorium and clapped until the program was over. He had bought her flowers, yellow roses, her favorite, which he remembered, and Kevin did not. She hugged her cohort friends for photographs. She hugged her mother. She hugged Kevin. Raymond drove them all to the restaurant she had chosen, sat at the end of the table, and paid the check when it came, without looking at the total. On the drive home, Tanya scrolled through her phone in the passenger seat. Already posting. It was around that time that the file box started attracting attention. It had always been there, on the top shelf of the bedroom closet, behind the shoeboxes. Raymond had moved it into every place he had lived since his father pressed it into his hands 18 years ago and said not yet. He had honored that. He took it down occasionally just to hold it, to feel its weight, to remember whose hands had given it to him. He always put it back without opening it. Tanya noticed it for the first time one evening, when she was reorganizing the closet and filming herself doing it for her growing Instagram following. She held the camera toward it briefly and said, to her audience and to no one, "Lord knows what's in that rusty little thing." Her followers left laughing emojis. Raymond, watching from the doorway, said nothing. Or the second time she mocked it on camera, 8 months later, she did not even look at him when she did it. 2 years after graduation, Tanya's firm offered her a promotion to senior consultant. She accepted the same evening they called. She mentioned it to Raymond over dinner that night, in between checking her phone and finishing her salad, with the same energy she used to tell him about traffic on the highway. She did not look up from the screen once. Raymond said congratulations and meant it. He cleared the dishes, he washed them by hand the way he always did, the gospel station playing low from the counter radio, the kitchen smelling like the chicken he had made from scratch. He was, to the very end, a good husband. And Tanya was already somewhere else entirely. As Tanya's status rose, and her contempt stopped being something she kept inside the house. The promotion changed her in ways that were subtle at first, and then impossible to ignore. She had a new title, senior consultant, strategy and operations. And she wore it the way some people wear a new coat, constantly, even indoors. She updated her LinkedIn profile with a headshot taken outside the firm's downtown tower on Peachtree Street, the glass facade catching the morning light behind her, her expression arranged into something between confidence and arrival. She got 1,000 likes in 48 hours. She mentioned the number at dinner. Raymond said that was wonderful. He meant it. But the woman who came home from that office every evening was not quite the same woman who had left in the morning. She had started measuring things differently. With not just money, though she tracked that constantly now, comparing her salary to her colleagues, calculating what a different address might cost, running numbers Raymond was not privy to. She was measuring something harder to name. She was measuring herself against an image she was assembling piece by piece, and Raymond, with his warehouse badge and his sensible car and his clearance rack shirts, kept failing to fit inside it. She stopped wearing her wedding ring to firm events sometime in the spring of that year. Raymond noticed the first time she came home without it and said nothing. He noticed the second time, the third. He understood what it meant. He kept understanding it quietly, the way he kept understanding everything, folding it into the part of himself that had learned long ago that some truths are better held than spoken. And the introduction she used for him at firm gatherings evolved in small, precise degrees. First it was, "This is my husband Raymond, he's in logistics." Then it became, "My husband, he works in logistics," with a half-second pause before logistics that carried more weight than the words themselves. Then, at the firm's annual client reception that October, she introduced him to her managing partner with a vague wave of her hand and the words, "And this is Raymond," and moved on before the man had finished shaking his hand. The managing partner had looked at Raymond with the polite blankness of someone who had already categorized him and moved on. Raymond had shaken the man's hand firmly, smiled, and spent the rest of the evening near the shrimp cocktail. For watching Tanya work the room like she was auditioning for a role she had already decided was hers. One of her colleagues had approached him near the end of the night, a young woman with a tablet under her arm, and asked if he was with the catering company. Raymond had said no, he was with his wife, and pointed. The woman had blinked, apologized, and walked away quickly. Raymond had driven them both home in silence, and Tanya had been on her phone the whole 40 minutes. Kevin moved back in that November. He said it was temporary. He said he just needed a few months to sort some things out. He brought 3 bags, a television, and opinions he had not been asked for, and he installed all of them in the guest room with the ease of a man who had never truly left. Within 2 weeks he had developed a rhythm at Briarwood Court, up late, loud in the mornings, eating food Raymond had bought without acknowledging it, offering commentary on Raymond's life like a man with something to say and nowhere better to say it. The combination of Kevin and Tanya's new professional confidence was something Raymond felt the way you feel a change in weather before the clouds arrive. There was a frequency in the house that had shifted. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. Tanya and Kevin talked in the kitchen at night in voices too low to be casual. Raymond did not listen at doors. He was not that kind of man, but he felt it. Dion noticed before Raymond admitted it to himself. He was in the barber chair on a Thursday afternoon, Dion working the clippers along his fade with the practiced ease of a man who had been cutting Raymond's hair since they were both in their 20s. Till when Dion set down the clippers and looked at him in the mirror with an expression Raymond recognized as something beyond barbershop small talk. "You good?" Dion said. "I'm fine," Raymond said. Dion picked the clippers back up. He did not push. That was the thing about Dion. He always gave Raymond room. but the question sat in the air between them for the rest of the cut, and Raymond drove home with it still there. That evening, after Tanya had gone to sleep and Kevin was watching something loud in the guest room, Raymond stood in the kitchen with his phone and dialed a number he had memorized years ago. A number in Memphis, a number that connected him to Gerald Pierce's private office line at Beaumont Capital Management. Gerald answered on the second ring. Raymond said 3 words, "I think it's time." Gerald said he had been waiting, but he said Monday at 9 would work. Raymond said he would be there. He hung up, rinsed his glass, and went to bed. 3 weeks later, Tanya sent Kevin a text message. It said, "Sunday, set up the camera." Raymond already had a 9 o'clock appointment that had been waiting 18 months for him to be ready. He was ready. Pacing begins to accelerate from this chapter forward. The slow burn is over. The Beaumont Capital Management offices were on the 14th floor of a building on Marietta Street that did not advertise itself. No logo on the lobby directory. No signage in the elevator bank. Just a frosted glass door with a suite number, and behind it a reception area furnished in dark wood and quiet air, the kind of place that had never needed to impress anyone because everyone who found it already knew exactly what it was. Raymond arrived 7 minutes early. He sat in a chair near the window and looked out over the city he had lived in for 11 years and said nothing to the receptionist beyond his name. She nodded like she had been expecting him. She had been. Gerald Pierce came through the inner door at exactly 9 o'clock. He was 67 years old, built narrow and precise, with close-cropped grey hair and the kind of unhurried walk that belongs to men who have never once been late and have therefore never needed to rush. He wore a dark suit and no tie. He shook Raymond's hand with both of his, the way Raymond's father used to shake hands, and said it was good to finally meet him in person. His voice carried the particular cadence of old Memphis, slow and deliberate, every word chosen before it left his mouth. But he had known Raymond's father for 31 years. They sat across from each other at a conference table made of a single piece of dark wood, and Gerald opened a folder that was already waiting there and began to speak. He started at the beginning. Raymond's father, Clifton Beaumont, had spent 22 years working the rails as a Pullman porter, saving with a discipline that bordered on devotion and investing quietly on the side through connections he built in the cities he passed through: Memphis, Chicago, Atlanta, New Orleans. He had started acquiring real estate in the late 1970s, industrial parcels mostly, the kind of land that nobody fashionable wanted. He had incorporated Beaumont Capital as a holding entity in 1983, structuring it entirely in Raymond's name at the advice of a lawyer who had helped him navigate a business dispute that threatened everything he had built. Raymond had been 19 years old when his name went on the paperwork. His father had told him only that he was protecting something important, and that Raymond would understand when it was time. Gerald walked him through the portfolio methodically. Industrial real estate holdings in 4 states, currently valued at approximately $2.1 billion, a diversified logistics infrastructure fund, a minority stake, acquired in 2019, in a regional freight company called Meridian Hall Group, which had been privately held until 18 months ago, on when it was acquired by a sovereign infrastructure consortium in a deal that closed at $38.4 billion. Raymond's stake, as sole owner of Beaumont Capital, had converted to cash and reinvested instruments at settlement. The total current valuation of all Beaumont Capital assets was $40 billion. Raymond did not move. Gerald continued. He explained the trust architecture, the tax structures, the instrument classifications. He was precise in the way that men are precise when they have spent decades being careful with something that mattered. Raymond listened to all of it without interrupting, his hands flat on the table, his face giving away nothing. Then Gerald mentioned the subsidiary contracts. He was walking through the logistics fund's active agreements. Routine information, I'm part of the full disclosure. And he named the contracting firms in order. The fourth name on the list was Meridian Consulting Group, a supply chain strategy firm based in Atlanta, operating under a service agreement routed through a Beaumont subsidiary called Vantage Freight Solutions. Raymond's hands did not move, but something behind his eyes did. He asked Gerald to repeat the name of the fourth firm. Gerald repeated it. Raymond was quiet for 4 full seconds. Then he reached into the bag he had brought with him and set the metal file box on the conference table between them. It made a small, solid sound against the wood. Gerald looked at it without expression. He recognized it. He had seen Clifton Beaumont carry it once, a long time ago. Raymond worked the combination, a date he had never forgotten, at his father's birthday, and opened the lid for the first time. Inside, a letter on Beaumont capital letterhead, dated 14 months ago, addressed to Raymond and signed by Gerald, a stock certificate. And beneath both of those, folded twice, a single sheet of handwritten paper in his father's careful cursive. Raymond unfolded it and read it. He read it completely without hurrying. Then he folded it again and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. He did not share its contents. Gerald did not ask. Raymond looked across the table and said, "What would happen if I initiated a full contract review of all subsidiary agreements?" Gerald explained the mechanism without hesitation. As sole owner, Raymond had the authority to trigger a comprehensive review of every active contract under the Beaumont umbrella. Any agreement under review would be flagged as pending renegotiation. Contracting firms would be notified formally. No payments would be interrupted immediately, but the uncertainty alone would be significant for firms whose business models depended on those contracts as anchor accounts. Gerald finished and waited. Raymond nodded slowly, the way a man nods when something he already suspected has just been confirmed. "Give me 48 hours, he said. "Then we move." Raymond sat in his car in the parking garage beneath the Marietta Street building for 11 minutes before he started the engine. He was not emotional. That was the thing about Raymond Beaumont that the people who underestimated him never understood. His stillness was not emptiness. It was discipline. But he had spent 41 years learning to let the noise of a situation pass through him without taking root, and he applied that same discipline now, sitting with the weight of $40 billion settling quietly into his understanding like water, finding its level. He started the engine and drove back to Gerald's office. They spent 2 hours at the conference table mapping it out, and Gerald did not waste a single word. The strategy had 2 phases executed in precise order. First, the contract review, initiated through Beaumont Capital's subsidiary management arm, routed through Vantage Freight Solutions, unsigned by Raymond directly, carrying no personal identifiers that would connect it to him. Every contracting firm under the Beaumont umbrella would receive formal notification simultaneously. Tanya's firm, a Meridian Consulting Group, would be one name on a long list, unremarkable, anonymous, just paperwork arriving on a Tuesday morning. Second, the divorce response. Gerald did not handle family law, but he knew exactly who did. He slid a business card across the table. Adrienne Cole, asset protection and family law. Gerald said she was the best in Atlanta and that she had handled matters of significantly greater complexity than this one. Raymond picked up the card, looked at it once, and called the number from Gerald's conference room before he left the building. Adrienne Cole answered her own phone. She had an opening at 4 o'clock that same afternoon, and Raymond took it. Her office was on Peachtree Road, 12 floors up, with a view that looked directly toward the tower where Tanya's firm occupied 3 floors of glass and ambition. Raymond did not mention this to Adrienne. He simply sat across from her and explained the situation in the same measured voice he used for everything, and watched her expression move from professional attention to quiet precision as the numbers came into focus. She was thorough and she was fast. The trust structure, she confirmed, was ironclad. Beaumont Capital had been established before the marriage, held in Raymond's name exclusively, never commingled with any marital asset, never referenced in any joint financial document. Tanya's legal team could file whatever counterclaim they wanted. It would not survive its first review. The projected cost of defending against it was minimal. The projected outcome was total protection. Raymond would walk away with everything his father had built. Adrienne said she could have the divorce response filed by Wednesday morning with the full Beaumont Capital asset disclosure attached as a primary exhibit. Raymond said that would be fine. He signed the retainer agreement without reading it slowly because he had already read it carefully. He had one more stop to make. Dion's barbershop on Campbellton Road closed at 7, and Raymond arrived at 6:15. The last client was in the chair, and Dion was finishing up, his clippers moving with the easy efficiency of a man in complete command of his craft. He caught Raymond's eye in the mirror and nodded toward the waiting chairs without breaking his rhythm. Raymond sat down, picked up a magazine he did not read, and waited. When the client left, Dion swept up without rushing, and then turned around and looked at Raymond properly for the first time. "Talk," Dion said. Raymond talked. He laid it out simply, the way he did everything, without drama or embellishment. The meeting that morning, Gerald Pierce, the holding company, the freight acquisition, the number. He said the number plainly, the same way Gerald had said it, and watched Dion's face go through the full journey in about 4 seconds. Disbelief, recalculation, a long blink, and then a stillness that mirrored Raymond's own. Dion set his broom against the wall very carefully, as if he needed something to do with his hands. He said, $40 billion. Raymond said yes. Dion was quiet for what felt like a full minute. Then he said, quietly and with great feeling, a series of words that this story will not repeat, but that expressed, with perfect economy, exactly what every person listening right now is feeling in this moment. Raymond almost smiled. He told Dion about Tanya's firm, the contract dependency, the filing going in Wednesday morning. Dion listened to all of it, and then shook his head slowly, not in disbelief, but in a particular kind of recognition. The recognition of a man who had watched his friend absorb 9 years of quiet mistreatment and had never once heard that friend complain. "You not going to say anything?" Dion asked. "Before it hits?" Raymond thought about it for exactly 1 second. "The paperwork will say it for me," he said. He drove home. He cooked a simple dinner. Rice, chicken, a little hot sauce the way his mother used to make it. He watched the news. Tanya came home at 11 without explanation. He said good night and went to sleep. Tuesday morning, Beaumont Capital's contract review notices went out. Wednesday morning, Adrienne Cole filed Raymond's divorce response with the full asset disclosure attached as Exhibit A, $40 billion, in black and white, on the public record. Tanya's attorney opened the filing Thursday morning at 8:47. Thursday morning, Tanya's attorney opened the filing at 8:47. By 9:15, he had called her 3 times. She was in a client presentation when her phone lit up the 4th time, and she stepped out into the hallway with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to manage interruptions professionally. She answered expecting to hear something routine, a procedural question, a scheduling conflict. Her attorney read her the number, $40 billion. Tanya laughed. It was a sharp sound, the laugh of someone who has heard something so absurd that the body responds before the mind can catch up. She said something dismissive. Her attorney did not laugh back. He read the number again, slowly, and told her to find somewhere private. She stopped laughing. She walked to a colleague's office, closed the door, and stood with her back against it while her attorney explained what Adrienne Cole had filed. The Beaumont Capital Asset Disclosure, the trust structure, the sole ownership instruments bearing Raymond's name, dated back 22 years, the total valuation, the complete legal protection of every asset under that umbrella, predating the marriage, never commingled, untouchable. Her counterclaim was already dead. She did not speak for almost a full minute. Then she said she needed to call him back. She hung up and stood in that borrowed office and tried to remember where she had heard the name Beaumont Capital before. Down the hall, behind closed doors, and her managing partner was holding an emergency meeting that Tanya had not been invited to attend. The contract review notice from Vantage Freight Solutions, a subsidiary of Beaumont Capital, had arrived Tuesday. The managing partner had flagged it immediately, but said nothing publicly while the firm's legal team assessed it. The assessment was now complete. The Meridian Consulting Group's anchor account, a logistics service contract worth $340 million over 5 years, was at risk of non-renewal. The room was very quiet while he said that number. Tanya heard about the meeting from a colleague who passed her in the hallway 20 minutes later. She went back into the borrowed office. She closed the door again. She sat down in someone else's chair and put the name together. Beaumont. Beaumont Capital. Beaumont. As in Raymond. The understanding arrived not like a wave, but like a floor giving way. Sudden, total, leaving nothing beneath her. She called Kevin. He answered on the first ring, already wound up, already performing confidence the way he always did when he sensed trouble. He told her not to panic. He told her attorneys made these kinds of claims all the time to intimidate. He told her Raymond didn't have $40, let alone $40 billion. She told him about the contract review. Kevin went quiet. She told him about the subsidiary name, quieter still. She told him about Beaumont Capital. He said he would make some calls. He made 3. None of them helped. Nobody he knew had anything useful to say about a situation this far outside their collective understanding. He stopped calling. He stopped posting on social media. And he sat in the guest room that had become his permanent address and said nothing to anyone for the rest of the day. Shirley called Tanya's attorney directly on Friday morning. The attorney could not speak to her. She called Raymond. He did not answer. She called twice more. The calls went to voicemail, and Raymond's voicemail was a simple recording of his name and a request to leave a message, steady and unhurried, the same voice it had always been. He did not call her back. Friday afternoon arrived. Someone, somewhere, had resurfaced the clip from Sunday. They had added 4 words as a caption above it. The words were, "She mocked a billionaire." It spread the way only the most perfectly timed things spread. Fast, wide, unstoppable. Every repost adding fuel to the next. By Friday evening, it had 8 million views. By Saturday morning, the number was still climbing. Tanya's LinkedIn began receiving messages. Not many at first, then more. Her firm's HR department flagged the video Friday morning and forwarded it to the managing partner. He watched it. He had already connected Beaumont to the contract review. He now connected Beaumont to the woman down the hall who had publicly humiliated the man who owned the contract. He did not call Tanya into his office. He did not send an angry email. He sent a quiet one. It arrived Friday at 4:41 in the afternoon, and it informed Tanya that the senior consultant promotion, previously scheduled for approval in 6 weeks, was being placed on indefinite hold pending a review of professional conduct standards. No explanation, no timeline, no room for appeal. Tanya read it in her car in the parking garage. At the same garage she had once filmed herself in after the mediation, laughing about Raymond's little savings account. She sat there for a long time. The concrete was cold and grey around her. Her phone buzzed with notifications she did not open. She tried calling Kevin. The call went through, but he did not have anything useful left to say. She tried calling her attorney again. He answered and told her quietly and without cruelty that her counterclaim had no legal foundation, that the trust was fully protected, and that she was currently looking at approximately $180,000 in projected legal fees for a case she had already lost. She put the phone face down on the passenger seat. Outside, in the bright ordinary world above the parking garage, 8 million people were watching her hold up a Walmart shirt. On Tuesday morning, her attorney called Adrienne Cole's office and requested a meeting. Tanya wanted to speak to Raymond directly. Adrienne Cole's conference room was on the 12th floor, and the windows looked out over the city in every direction. It was a room designed for clarity. Clean lines, dark wood, no decoration beyond what was necessary. The kind of room where things got settled. Tanya arrived first. She came with her attorney, a man named Forsyth, who had spent the last week quietly communicating to her through careful professional language that their position was very weak. She was dressed well. She was always dressed well. But something in the way she held herself had changed. The performance was gone. What remained was just a woman sitting in a chair, waiting. Kevin had tried to come. Raymond's team had said no. A single line in an email from Adrienne's office. The meeting was between the parties only. Kevin had pushed back briefly and then stopped pushing, the way he always stopped when he hit something he could not charm or bluster through. Shirley had not asked to come. That was perhaps the most telling detail of all. Raymond arrived at 2 o'clock exactly. He walked through the door alone, and the first thing Tanya's eyes went to, before his face, before his hands, before anything else, was the shirt. The pale blue Walmart button-down, the graduation shirt. He had pressed it. The collar was crisp. He wore it tucked in with dark slacks and simple shoes, and he looked exactly like what he was, a man who took care of his things. Tanya looked at the shirt and then looked away, and she did not say a single word about it, because she understood. In that moment she understood completely what he was telling her, and the understanding sat in her chest like a stone. Raymond sat down across from her and folded his hands on the table. Adrienne Cole sat beside him, a closed folder in front of her, expression neutral. Raymond looked at Tanya and said, "Go ahead." She had prepared something. She had practiced in the car on the way over, according to Forsyth, who had helped her find language that was neither admission nor full capitulation. She spoke about mutual respect, about the stress of the past year, about how things had gotten out of hand and how she hoped they could resolve this in a way that was fair to both of them. She used the word fair several times. She stopped just short of apologizing, not the way a person stops just short of a cliff they can feel but cannot see. Raymond let her finish completely. Then he was quiet for a moment, not the pause of a man gathering himself, but the pause of a man who has already decided every word and is simply choosing the right time to begin. He started with the shirt. He told her he had worn it to her graduation. He told her he had ironed it the morning of the ceremony and driven 40 minutes to stand in the back of that auditorium because there were no seats left by the time he arrived. He told her he had been proud of her that day, genuinely, fully proud, and that the pride had cost him nothing because it was real. He said he had brought it to this meeting because he wanted her to see it clearly one more time without a camera between them. Then he told her about the contract, and he told her that when Gerald Pierce read him the list of Beaumont subsidiary contractors on that Monday morning and named her firm as the fourth entry on that list, he had asked Gerald to repeat the name, not because he was surprised, but because he needed one moment to absorb the full weight of what it meant. He told her he had known about the dependency before he filed. He had chosen to let the paperwork move anyway, without warning her, because he believed she deserved to discover it the same way he had discovered her contempt, through a document, quietly, without anyone softening it. Tanya's hands were very still on the table. Raymond reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it slowly and set it flat on the table. His father's handwriting was large and careful, the cursive of a man who had taught himself to write well late in life because he believed presentation was a form of respect. Raymond read it aloud. The note said, "Don't open this until you need it. You'll know whatever is in this box is yours completely, the same way my belief in you has always been complete. I built it for you because I saw what I saw in you from the beginning. Don't let anybody tell you what you are worth. You already know." Raymond folded the note and put it back in his pocket. The room was very quiet. Then he stood. He buttoned the top button of the pale blue shirt, straightened it once at the collar, and looked at Tanya Beaumont for the last time with the full, undivided attention of a man who had given her 9 years of exactly that and received very little in return. He said, "You held up my Walmart shirt and called it 9 years of settling, but what you didn't know was that shirt came home every night to a man whose name was on $40 billion, that the firm you're so proud of runs on a contract I control, and that the only thing I ever settled for in this marriage was staying quiet long enough for you to show me exactly who you are." Tanya did not speak. Her face did not collapse into anger or tears. It did something more devastating than either. It simply went still. The stillness of someone who has finally, completely understood something that cannot be undone. Raymond walked to the door. He did not look back. Adrienne Cole picked up her folder, stood, and followed him without a word. Forsyth quietly closed his own folder. No one in the room spoke for a very long time. 6 months passed. 6 months later, the world had rearranged itself into something that looked very much like justice. Meridian Consulting Group did not renew its contract with Vantage Freight Solutions. The decision was communicated formally, without drama, through the standard channels that large financial decisions travel. The firm's managing partner announced the loss of the account at an all-hands meeting on a Tuesday morning, and the room understood immediately what it meant. 11 positions were eliminated by the end of the month. Tanya was not among the 11. She kept her desk, kept her badge, kept her salary, but she did not keep her accounts. She was reassigned quietly to a portfolio of smaller regional clients, the kind of work that junior consultants handled in their first year. There was no announcement, no new title, and just a revised list of responsibilities that arrived in her inbox on a Wednesday afternoon without explanation or apology. A demotion dressed in silence. She went to work every day and did the work and said very little to anyone. The woman who had once narrated her own life for 40,000 followers had gone completely still. Kevin moved out in the 3rd month. He had found a job, actual steady employment, the kind he had avoided for years, at a distribution warehouse on the south side of Atlanta. He took his 3 bags and his television and left the guest room without ceremony. He stopped posting on social media the same week he moved out, and the silence from his accounts was its own kind of statement. The man who had held the camera and grinned while his brother-in-law was humiliated on live stream had discovered, finally, that an audience required something worth watching. He had nothing left to show. Shirley stopped attending Mount Calvary Baptist in the 4th month. The congregation had seen the video. Of course they had. 8 million people had seen it. And the particular social physics of a church community are precise and unforgiving in ways that no professional consequence ever quite manages to be. The women who had once deferred to Shirley's opinions about other people's husbands now had opinions of their own. She began attending a smaller church across town where no one knew her name yet. She was starting over at 63 in a pew where she was nobody, because she had spent too many years making sure that somebody else was nobody first. Raymond, meanwhile, did what Raymond had always done. He went to work. The work was different now, and the Beaumont Foundation was incorporated in the 5th month, with Gerald Pierce serving as its first board member and Raymond as its founding chair. The Foundation's inaugural initiative was a logistics training program for young men between the ages of 18 and 26 in Atlanta and Memphis. Warehouse operations, freight coordination, supply chain management, the exact disciplines that Raymond had spent his working life mastering without anyone asking him what he knew. The program offered paid apprenticeships and industry certifications, and it was structured specifically to reach men who had been told, in various ways and by various people, that their version of work did not count as ambition. Raymond knew exactly who those men were. He had been standing in their shoes at a $6 shirt clearance rack not so long ago that he purchased his father's original property in Memphis, a narrow lot on a quiet street in Orange Mound where Clifton Beaumont had lived for 30 years before the rails took him away, and where Raymond had spent summers as a boy eating his grandmother's cooking and listening to the old men on the porch talk about things that mattered. He had the property restored with care and precision, every original detail honored where it could be, and he donated it to a community organization that used it as a gathering space for neighborhood programs. He did not put his name on the building. He still drove a sensible car. He still ate at the same diner on Campbellton Road when he was in Atlanta, the one with the laminate menus and the sweet tea that came in a glass so cold it sweated in your hand. Dion still cut his hair every 2 weeks. The same chair, same conversation, same easy rhythm of 2 men who had known each other long enough not to need to perform for each other. It was at a community event in Memphis, connected to the Foundation's first program launch, that Raymond met a woman named Clara Winston. She was a librarian. She had organized the event's reading corner for the younger siblings of the program participants, and was quietly, competently managing 4 simultaneous things at once when Raymond noticed her. They spoke briefly. She laughed at something he said, and the laugh was real, the unguarded kind that belongs to people who are not performing anything. He thought about it on the drive back to his hotel. He thought about it for several days after that, and that is where we will leave Raymond Beaumont, not in a boardroom, not in a courtroom. I'm not standing over the ruins of someone else's pride. We will leave him in a city that meant something to his father, doing work that means something to other people, thinking about a woman with a real laugh. That is what the victory looked like, not a spectacle, a life, because here is what this story has always been about. The most dangerous thing you can do to a person is decide what they are worth before you understand what they carry. Tanya Beaumont looked at a man and saw a shirt. She never once looked inside the box. And that single, devastating failure of attention cost her everything she thought she had built. True worth does not announce itself. It does not perform for cameras or beg to be recognized at dinner tables, or compete for space in someone else's narrative. It simply waits the way Raymond waited, and for the moment when it is finally, completely, undeniably time. Now, what would you have done in Raymond's position? Would you have warned her? Would you have walked away without a word? Or would you have worn the shirt and let the room go quiet? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one. And this community never disappoints. If this story moved you even a little, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second and it helps more people find stories like this one. And if you are not subscribed yet, today is the day, because we have more coming and you do not want to be the person who missed it. We will see you in the next one.